Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something quietly personal, something you might not say out loud even to your closest friend. Have you ever walked away from a relationship feeling like a part of you was missing, but you couldn't quite explain what? Like your confidence, your clarity, maybe even your dignity had been siphoned off bit by bit until you barely recognized the man in the mirror. Not because she shouted, not because she cheated, but because you always felt like you were the one apologizing, the one trying harder, the one guessing what she wanted only to be told it was never enough. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from being manipulated emotionally, from being made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, or selfish for needing space. And sometimes the woman who does this, she does it with a smile. This isn't about blaming women, this is about understanding dynamics. It's about waking up from that fog you didn't even know you were living in, because deceptive and manipulative behavior isn't always loud, but it is always costly. Especially for the man who keeps giving while slowly fading into someone he never intended to become. So today we're going to talk heart to heart about how to recognize when the love you think you have is quietly becoming a game of control. Because awareness isn't just power, it's protection, and you deserve both. I want you to sit with this moment. Let your shoulders drop. Breathe just a little slower, because today we're going somewhere intimate. Not just into a topic, but into a part of your history you may have buried under logic or pride or shame. You know the one, the relationship you thought was love, but left you with more questions than peace. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything looked right on the outside, but inside you were constantly doubting yourself? Like you were trying to hit a moving target, where one day she adored you, couldn't stop touching you, staring at you like you were the center of her universe. And the next, cold, detached, passive-aggressive, disappearing behind vague excuses or cryptic silence. And yet she never quite gave you enough reason to leave, just enough confusion to stay. That is not love. That's manipulation, and the reason we're talking about this is because too many men don't know how to name it. They feel it deeply, but they lack the language, the framework, because no one teaches boys how to spot emotional abuse dressed up as affection. And let me be very clear, this is not a video about hating women. This is a conversation about protecting your emotional life from deception. It's about rebuilding your ability to trust yourself again, because when you've been with a manipulative woman, the real wound isn't just heartbreak. It's self-abandonment. So how do you know when you're with someone who's manipulating you? Let's begin with something that feels so flattering it's often overlooked: excessive idealization. When a woman puts you on a pedestal within days or even hours of knowing you, that's not romance, that's strategy. She doesn't love you. She loves what you represent, the fantasy of control wrapped in the illusion of admiration. You're not like other guys. She might say, I've never felt this way before. And in your mind it's intoxicating. Who doesn't want to feel special, needed? But here's the catch. Real connection takes time. It unfolds, it questions, it listens, it waits. Idealization, on the other hand, rushes past all that. It floods you with affection, praise, sexual chemistry. And it doesn't ask you to breathe. It drowns you before you realize you've lost your footing. If you find yourself fast, tracking your entire emotional life because someone is making you feel like a king on day 2, pause. Because that pedestal is not made for stability. It's made to break you when you eventually fall off it. Manipulative women don't see you. They see your utility, your money, your emotional labor, your social status, your loyalty. All of it is currency to her, but she needs to hook you first, and she knows praise is a potent drug. The next sign, and this one is harder to admit, is when her words and actions constantly contradict each other, and yet you're the one made to feel crazy for noticing. One minute she's telling you how much she trusts you, how deeply she loves you. The next, she's talking to her ex behind your back and saying, "Why are you being so insecure? He's just a friend." Or she flirts with other men in front of you, then accuses you of being controlling when you say it bothers you. This is gaslighting in its most seductive form. It's not just lying, it's shaping your reality until you no longer trust your gut. And let me say this with tenderness and urgency. When a man loses faith in his own perception, he becomes emotionally dependent on hers. That is how control is established, not through brute force, but through subtle erosion. You'll start second, guessing your instincts. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll spend your nights thinking, maybe I am overreacting, just so you can keep the peace. But here's the truth. Love that costs you your clarity is not love. It's emotional exile. You start living outside your own skin just to survive the day-to-day confusion. And you don't even realize it until someone says, "You haven't been yourself lately," and you can't remember who that was. Another common dynamic is the use of guilt as a leash. She doesn't need to yell. She doesn't need to threaten. All she has to do is make you feel bad about taking space, about setting boundaries, about needing time for your work, your friends, your solitude. She might say, "Well, I guess I'm not important to you anymore," when you need a weekend to recharge. Or, "You never make time for me," after you've spent hours listening to her problems, and what happens next? You adjust, you shrink your world to avoid disappointing her, you give in. Not because you agree, but because you want to avoid the emotional punishment that comes next: the sulking, the cold shoulder, the withdrawal of affection. You learn to prioritize her emotional temperature over your own well-being, and in that moment she doesn't need to tell you what to do. She's already trained you to do it yourself. This is how many manipulative relationships are sustained, not by cruelty, but by emotional leverage. Guilt becomes a tool, a transaction, and the saddest part, you think being selfless makes you noble. But it's not nobility if the cost is your emotional dignity. It's codependency, and it's not your job to rescue someone who weaponizes their sadness. There's also a form of manipulation that looks like crisis after crisis. She's always overwhelmed, always in some kind of emotional emergency. And it feels noble to be the hero, to drop everything and be the one who gets her. But what you don't realize is that her chaos is the glue. It keeps you in motion, keeps you invested, because every time you think of walking away, she falls apart just enough to pull you back in. You end up stuck in a loop, rescuer, comforter, stabilizer, but who's doing that for you? Where do your needs live in this equation? Because the truth is, you're not in a partnership, you're in a performance. You've become an emotional caretaker for someone who refuses to self-regulate, and you mistake that for intimacy. The hardest part of all of this is that manipulative women don't look like villains. Often they appear soft, vulnerable, charming. But charm isn't character, tears aren't truth, and affection isn't the same as accountability. If a woman never apologizes, never owns her part, but always expects you to adjust, accommodate, or fix, it's time to ask yourself, what kind of love requires this much self-abandonment? And maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready to admit this isn't love at all. Sometimes the most dangerous part isn't her words, it's what she withholds. Her silence can feel louder than any scream, and not the kind of silence that gives space or honors complexity, but the kind that punishes. The kind that teaches you that connection is a reward you have to earn back every time you disappoint her. She doesn't say, "I'm upset," or "Can we talk?" Instead, she disappears emotionally. She shuts down. She creates distance, and suddenly you're left walking on eggshells, scrambling to find out what you did wrong. You send the texts, make the calls, replay the conversations, hoping for a clue, and that hunger for resolution, she feeds on that. Because now you're dancing for her validation, and when she finally speaks again, when she smiles at you after days of coldness, it feels like relief. But that's the trap. You've confused relief with love. It's in this loop, withdrawal and reward, that the manipulative dynamic thrives. You're no longer in a relationship. You're in an emotional casino. Sometimes she's warm, sometimes she's icy, but always just unpredictable enough to keep you hooked. And what do we know about intermittent rewards? They're the most addictive. The mind starts to believe, if I just do a little more, give a little more, adjust a little better, I'll win her back completely. But you won't, because the game was never about love, it was about control. And there's another kind of manipulation that looks harmless on the surface, but runs deep, when everything is always your fault. No matter the situation, somehow, you're the reason she's unhappy. You didn't call soon enough. You didn't respond the right way. You weren't sensitive enough to her mood swings. She doesn't reflect, she deflects. She doesn't own her triggers, she blames you for pulling them. And over time you start believing it, not because it's true, but because the alternative, that someone you love refuses to take responsibility, is too painful to accept. So you internalize her chaos, you carry it. You think, if I were more emotionally available, if I communicated better, if I didn't say that one thing that set her off, maybe she wouldn't be so upset. But that's the illusion. Because a healthy woman doesn't make you responsible for her every emotion, she shares her experience. She invites dialogue. She doesn't use her feelings as weapons. But a manipulative woman, she'll turn every conversation into a mirror where you only see your flaws. Her goal isn't understanding, it's dominance, and her method is subtle. She doesn't raise her voice, she raises doubt. About yourself, she might say, I never said that, when you bring up something she clearly did, or you're so sensitive, when you express hurt. Or my personal favorite, wow, you really love making everything about you, when you finally ask for your needs to be met. These aren't offhand comments, they're surgical. Each one plants a seed, seeds of self, doubt, guilt, shame. And over time you stop bringing things up, you stop setting boundaries, you start choosing silence over truth. Because silence feels safer than the fallout, and in that moment she wins, not the kind of victory that comes from love or resolution, but the kind that keeps you small. Tame, predictable. There's another layer to all this, and it's especially painful for men who genuinely want to protect and care for the people they love. It's when her trauma becomes your leash. You see, she tells you her story. Maybe she was abandoned. Maybe she was cheated on. Maybe she suffered in ways that leave her raw and reactive. And your empathy. It lights up like a beacon. You want to be the man who never hurts her, who never leaves, who finally proves that love can be safe. But what you don't see is that her trauma becomes her license to test you, to provoke you, to guilt you into silence. And if you ever bring it up, she'll say, so now you're using my pain against me. And just like that, your hands are tied. You're no longer in a relationship. You're in an emotional hostage situation where your desire to be good is weaponized against your need to be free. This is where things get blurry, because the manipulative woman doesn't always appear cruel. Sometimes she's wounded. Fragile, but emotional wounds are not an excuse for emotional warfare. You can have compassion for her pain and boundaries for her behavior. Both can be true, and if she doesn't respect your limits, if she only honors her pain but never yours, you are not her partner. You are her emotional servant. What makes this so dangerous is that manipulation is often mistaken for depth, for passion, for complexity, but it's not. Love isn't supposed to make you question your sanity or erase your identity, or make you feel like walking away is betrayal rather than survival. Real love isn't a game of power. It's not about who wins or who breaks first. It's about growth, about feeling safe enough to be vulnerable, to be wrong, to be human. If you're with someone who makes you feel like love is a battlefield, ask yourself, when did intimacy start to feel like war? And who told you that peace was boring? You see, there's something seductive about chaos. It makes you feel alive. Until one day you realize that the fire you thought was passion was actually just destruction, and you're the one holding the ashes of your self-worth. And here's something I want you to hear with your whole heart. You don't have to earn your right to be treated with respect. You don't have to prove your worth through sacrifice. You don't have to rescue someone to feel like a man. In fact, your masculinity is not measured by how much pain you can endure in the name of love. It's measured by how fiercely you protect your peace. If a woman only loves you when you're convenient, agreeable, emotionally available on demand, but disappears when you need something real, that is not love. That is conditional affection. That is manipulation. That is control, and you deserve more than that. You deserve someone who sees you, not just uses you. Someone who listens to you, not just talks at you. Someone who can say, I was wrong, and not just expect you to always be the one apologizing. You deserve someone who shows up not only when you're strong and capable and put together, but also when you're vulnerable, unsure, maybe even breaking. Because love isn't tested in the grand gestures. It's tested in the quiet, ordinary moments where truth feels risky and compassion feels rare. And if the person you're with punishes you for being honest, or manipulates you into silence, or constantly plays victim while casting you as the villain, then the relationship is not safe. It's not sacred. It's not sustainable. So if you're sitting there thinking, but she had a rough past, or I don't want to be the guy who abandons her, I want you to remember this. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be loving without losing yourself. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to walk away, because real love doesn't trap, yet frees. There's a moment in every man's life, whether he admits it or not, when he sits in a parked car or lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling and quietly wonders, is this what love is supposed to feel like? And not the first date, not the butterflies, not the passionate highs, but the in-between moments, the arguments, the silences, the way you feel after she walks out of the room, that hollow ache in your chest. Like your spirit's been picked at, and your confidence folded into something smaller than it used to be. And that's where the truth whispers. Maybe you're not just in a difficult relationship. Maybe you're in a manipulative one. Because, you see, one of the most deceptive tactics is when a woman twists your masculinity into a weapon. She calls you too emotional when you express pain. She accuses you of being cold when you draw a boundary. You're always either too much or not enough, and suddenly the very things that make you a man, your need for clarity, your desire for structure, your ability to lead become framed as flaws. Control, toxicity, but this isn't feedback, it's projection, it's emotional inversion. She takes your strength and redefines it as threat. She takes your needs and reframes them as demands. And so you shrink bit by bit, thinking that if you become more agreeable, more understanding, more gentle maybe, then she'll love you without the sharp edges. But love shouldn't ask you to amputate pieces of yourself just to earn its place in the room. Let me speak to something many men feel, but don't often say out loud, the shame of staying. You know it's not healthy. You know it's draining you, but part of you believes that leaving means you failed. That if you were stronger, wiser, more patient, you could fix her. That walking away would mean you weren't man enough to handle her complexity. But that's the lie, and it's a seductive one. Because manipulative women often wear the mask of the muse. The woman who says, I'm just difficult to love because I've been through so much, and yes, maybe she has. But pain doesn't give anyone the right to become an architect of confusion. Your empathy is beautiful, but it was never meant to be her playground. So how do you know you're truly in something deceptive? It's when your body starts to betray your spirit. You're tired even after rest, you dread going home, you hesitate before speaking, calculating her reaction before your own thoughts have fully formed. You've stopped laughing from your gut, you second, guess simple decisions, you stop making plans without checking if she'll be okay with it. You stop being you. And if you're honest, you start to feel like a supporting character in a movie that was supposed to be your life. That's not love, that's erosion. It doesn't look like a storm. It looks like slow leaks in the roof until the house caves in and you're still holding the hammer wondering what you broke. Now, here's the hard part. When you finally start seeing the truth, your brain will still resist. You'll remember the good times. The passion, the tears in her eyes when she said, "I can't live without you." That's the hook, the cycle. The emotional high followed by the devastating low. But you are not crazy for wanting peace over passion. You are not weak for choosing stability over emotional suspense. You are not heartless for wanting a love that feels safe in your nervous system and not just thrilling in your fantasies. Let me offer you something radical. Love should feel like clarity, not constant interpretation. You shouldn't need a decoder ring to understand how she feels about you. You shouldn't have to rehearse every sentence before you say it. You shouldn't be made to believe that your instincts are a threat to the relationship. A healthy woman doesn't need to manipulate to feel powerful. She doesn't need to create chaos to feel wanted. She doesn't demand submission in the name of intimacy. She knows who she is, and she doesn't ask you to become less just to keep her comfortable. And I know sometimes that realization comes late. Maybe you're deep in it. Maybe there are kids. Maybe she's already planted the seed in your mind that if you leave, you're the bad guy. But you're not abandoning her. You're rescuing yourself, and sometimes that's the only way healing begins. Because until you break the spell, you'll keep confusing her inconsistency for mystery, her criticism for concern, her control for connection. But love doesn't twist, love doesn't punish, love doesn't turn you into a ghost of the man you once were. Real love, mature, grown, steady love, holds you accountable and safe. It challenges you without breaking you. It celebrates your strength and honors your softness. It invites you to evolve, not perform. So if you're watching this and something deep inside you is nodding silently, I want you to know you're not alone. There are so many men walking around with invisible bruises, never hit but harmed, not yelled at but emotionally dismantled. And you deserve to speak that truth, not just for closure but for freedom. It's time to rewrite the story. Not the one where you save her, but the one where you save yourself. Because at the end of the day, the most dangerous woman is not the one who yells, but the one who smiles while taking pieces of you. And the most powerful man is not the one who stays the longest, it's the one who finally says, "No more. Now take a breath." You've just taken the first step back to yourself, and I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, what truth resonated with you today? What have you seen, felt, or survived that no one else understood? This space is yours, and I promise, your voice matters here. If this video brought you clarity, if it gave you something to hold on to in the middle of confusion, please like the video. Share it with a brother, a father, a friend, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning of a deeper, more honest conversation. You are not made to be managed. You were made to be met fully, bravely, completely, and here's to that version of love, the one that doesn't hurt more than it heals. There's something deeply tragic about a man who starts to forget the sound of his own inner voice. Not because he's weak, not because he lacks intelligence, but because he's been trained slowly, quietly, expertly, to believe that love always demands sacrifice, even when it's one-sided. that if he just holds on a little longer, gives a little more, she'll finally soften, finally change, finally choose him without conditions. But that day never comes, because the woman he's loving isn't confused. She's in control. You see, we romanticize the struggle. We say real love is hard work. And yes, relationships take effort. But manipulation isn't effort. It's distortion. It's the bending of your reality so that her behavior never has to change, only yours does. And the more you adjust, the more she expects, until suddenly you're walking a tightrope she controls, trying not to fall from a height she created. And this is what so many men overlook. Manipulative women are rarely chaotic all the time. In fact, the most dangerous ones are those who know how to be charming, sweet, apologetic. Just enough. They know exactly when to cry, exactly when to show vulnerability, exactly when to say, "I know I messed up." Just long enough to pull you back into the loop. They're not always cruel, they're calculating, and that's what makes the bond harder to break. She might even say, "I don't deserve you," and you'll mistake that for growth. But watch what happens the next time you need something, the moment you ask her to change a behavior that hurts you. Suddenly you're too sensitive again. Suddenly she's the victim, and the moment you call her out, she flips the script. She didn't lie, you just misunderstood. She wasn't rude, you're just overreacting. She didn't betray your trust, you're just paranoid. And you, wanting so badly to believe that the woman you love is good, you second, guess yourself again. Because no one wants to believe they're being emotionally manipulated by someone they've shared a bed with, made plans with, maybe even built a life with. But love is not a reason to keep abandoning your boundaries. It's not an excuse to tolerate cycles that leave you emotionally bruised. Let's talk about one of the most confusing tactics of all, triangulation. It's when she brings someone else into your emotional ecosystem just to provoke jealousy, insecurity, or competition. Maybe it's an ex she still talks to because they're friends, or a coworker who gets her in ways you don't. Maybe it's just the constant mention of how other men treat her, subtly suggesting that you should be doing more. And suddenly you're not just fighting to feel secure, you're fighting to keep her attention, you're performing, trying to prove your worth, and what she's doing, whether consciously or not, is creating instability. Emotional scarcity, because if you're always feeling slightly inadequate, always slightly on edge, always slightly afraid to lose her, you'll never feel safe enough to walk away. And that's the goal, control through competition. The healthy woman builds a bridge between your hearts. The manipulative one builds a maze around hers, and she hides behind that maze, daring you to solve her, decode her, chase her. And every time you almost reach her, she moves the goalpost, because it was never about closeness, it was about power. I want to say something now that may sting a little, but you need to hear it. If you're always the one trying to fix things, initiate resolution, hold the emotional weight, be the adult in every argument, you're not in a relationship. You're in a caretaking dynamic. You're parenting someone who refuses to grow up. And the longer you stay, the more you'll start losing the fire that made you who you are. Your ambition will fade. Your joy will dull, your confidence will erode, not because you've changed, but because you've been drained. And the world will not notice, because on the outside everything might look fine. She might be beautiful, charismatic, outgoing, people might even say you're lucky to have her, but behind closed doors you're walking through a minefield. One wrong move, one misinterpreted word, one boundary too firm, and boom, explosion, and afterward, silence. Blame, coldness, you start to live for the good days, the days when she laughs, when she kisses your forehead. When she lets her guard down, and that's the tragedy, you begin to treat breadcrumbs like a feast. You convince yourself that those few golden hours of peace mean everything's okay again. But they're not. They're just the calm before the next storm, and the hardest part to accept is this: she's not going to change because you love her harder. You can't love manipulation. You can't therapy your way out of someone else's refusal to be honest with themselves. You can't rescue someone who's invested in their power more than in your peace. What you can do, what you must do, is return to yourself. The self that existed before her voice became louder than your own, the man who didn't have to ask permission to be whole. To speak, to say that hurt, to say that's not okay, to say this version of love isn't love at all, that man is still in there. He's not broken. He's buried under guilt, under shame, under years of being told he was too much or not enough or both, depending on the day. But he's waiting for you to stop asking for permission, for you to stop waiting for her to be different, for you to finally choose yourself. So let's sit here for a moment, just you and me, no noise, no defense. No rationalizations, just the truth you've been loving with your whole heart, maybe even with your eyes half closed. And that's not weakness, that's hope, because the part of you that stayed, even when you were mistreated, is the same part of you that still believes love should be redemptive, that it should heal, and it should, but not at the cost of your soul. There is no reward for martyrdom in relationships. No medal for how long you tolerated being misunderstood, controlled, or made to feel small. The longer you stay in something that chips away at your self-worth, the longer it takes to rebuild the man you were born to be. And I know it's not easy to leave. You're not just walking away from a person. You're walking away from the future you imagined, the promises she made, the nights where her touch felt real, and the stories you built around what you thought the relationship could become. But love built on fantasy is like a house of mirrors. You only see what you want to see until the reflections begin to fracture, and suddenly you're staring at someone you don't recognize. Yourself, the first time you say no to a manipulative woman, it won't feel liberating. It'll feel terrifying. You'll wonder if you're doing the right thing. You'll hear her voice in your head telling you you're selfish, heartless, abandoning her just like everyone else. But you're not everyone else. You tried, you stayed, you bent, you broke, and that is not failure, that is endurance. Now it's time for something else, resurrection. Because healing doesn't begin with her changing, it begins with you choosing to believe that you deserve a love that doesn't demand your silence. That doesn't turn your kindness into currency. That doesn't require you to suffer to feel significant. The kind of love that listens when you speak, stays when you're vulnerable, and grows with you, not at your expense. And I want you to know, this experience hasn't made you damaged, it's made you discerning. You're not broken. You're awakened, you see now, you notice the patterns, the way affection was used as a leash, the way crisis became a tool for control, the way every conflict turned into an inquisition on your character, the way you were always wrong, always guilty, always trying. Now you don't have to try, you just have to be. And the right woman, the kind who sees your strength and your softness, who honors your effort without exploiting it, she will meet you there. But first you must return home to yourself. Not the image of the man she needed you to be, but the man you are when no one is manipulating your emotions, second, guessing your needs or punishing your honesty. And let me say this, emotional abuse is real, even when there are no bruises, even when she says, "I never laid a hand on you." Words can wound deeper than silence. In silence, her favorite weapon, can suffocate a man's spirit if left unchecked, that exhaustion you feel. That's not love. That's trauma, and so today I want you to take back your voice, not with rage, not with revenge, but with calm clarity, the kind that says, "I see now," the kind that walks away without needing to slam the door, the kind that knows healing doesn't come through confrontation. It comes through distance, through perspective, through peace, because peace, that's what you've been starved of, and now that peace is yours to claim. You've paid for it with sleepless nights, with walking on eggshells, with silencing your needs so hers could be the only ones that mattered. Now it's your turn to breathe, to rest, to rebuild. Let her say what she will, let her tell the story in her way. You don't need to explain. The ones who matter will see your growth. They will see that you chose integrity over illusion, strength over submission, and truth over the comfort of denial. And if you're worried about being alone, remember this. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of connection, and you've already been lonely in her arms, so solitude, that's not the enemy. That's the sanctuary. That's where your soul gets to stretch again. That's where you remember your name. Not the one she called you in anger, the one you were born with, the one that means steady, present, whole. You don't need to become bitter. You don't need to hate her. You just need to choose yourself more often than you choose her moods. More often than you choose to keep the peace. Because peace kept by silence isn't peace. It's prison. So now I leave you with this. You are not here to be someone's emotional scapegoat. You are not here to carry their unhealed trauma. You are not here to bend, break, and beg just to be loved. You are here to build, to lead, to feel, to be seen, and when the right woman comes, and she will, you will not have to guess. You will not have to fight to be understood. You will not have to earn rest, because the kind of woman who truly sees you doesn't play games with your heart. She guards it as fiercely as you guard hers, so take this moment not as an ending, but as a beginning. You've outgrown the story. Now it's time to write a new one where your strength isn't mistaken for threat. One where your love is not met with manipulation. One where you finally belong not just to someone else, but to yourself. Thank you for watching. If you found healing in these words, let them breathe. Share them with someone who needs to hear them. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to this space, because here we don't just talk about relationships, we reclaim ourselves through them. Until next time, be kind to yourself, and remember, the most powerful man in the room is the one who refuses to be controlled by anything but love.